What's going on, everybody? Kalipus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the Cricket Ovation 3 and the Motorola Moto G Power 2022. Now, as always, if you do want to learn more about either phone individually, be sure to check out the description, where I will be linking to several other videos about them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the Cricket Ovation 3, we're getting a really large 6.82-inch IPS LCD display with a 720p resolution, a PPI of 246, and a 20.5:9 aspect ratio. With the Moto G Power, we're getting a 6.5-inch 90Hz IPS LCD display. This phone also has a 720p resolution, a PPI of 270, and a 20:9 aspect ratio. So in general, for being more entry-level devices, both phones do have really good displays. But as you can clearly see, at 6.82 inches versus, again, 6.5 with the Moto G Power, the Cricket Ovation 3 is clearly quite a bit larger. And with a 20.5:9 aspect ratio versus 20:9, it also has a slightly taller and more narrow form factor. So because of this, if you're going to be on your phone a bit more, especially consuming lots of content, maybe you're watching videos in landscape mode, or even just doing stuff like browsing the web or scrolling through social media, in general, with a larger display and a taller and more narrow form factor, you will get a better experience. So overall, if you are going to be on your phone a bit more, the Cricket Ovation 3 will have an advantage here. That being said though, the Moto G Power really isn't bad either. I mean, the image does look really nice. In fact, compared to the Ovation 3, I feel like things on the Moto G Power in general look a little bit better. And in addition to this, with a 90Hz refresh rate versus a standard 60Hz with the Ovation 3, the movement on the screen with the Moto G Power is going to be a bit faster and smoother, making the phone feel more premium to use. So in general, when it comes to the display, I really don't think either phone here is a bad choice. But of course, if you do tend to prefer a larger display, the Cricket Ovation 3 will be a better choice. Now for storage, with the Cricket Ovation 3, we're getting 32GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, and with the Moto G Power, this phone has 64GB with microSD card expansion as well. So clearly here, the Moto G Power has a huge advantage, having doubled the storage of the Cricket Ovation 3. So if you are someone who wants a decent amount of apps, then I would definitely go with the Moto G Power, because at this point in 2023, 32GB is just really not a lot of space, with things like apps, the system, and just files in general getting larger and larger. Unless you have maybe like a couple apps and you're really using your phone for the bare minimum, I would probably not go with a phone that has only 32GB. So yeah, in general, when it comes to storage, if that is more of an important factor for you, I would definitely go with the Moto G Power. For security features, both phones do have Face Unlock, and they both have fingerprint scanners right here in the back. But starting with the Cricket Ovation 3, let's give them a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. And now for the Moto G Power. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, both fingerprint scanners worked real well, no issues at all. Now taking a look at the camera setups here, with the Cricket Ovation 3, we got a typical water drop notch for the front facing camera. This camera is 8 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 13 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, and a 2 megapixel macro camera. With the Moto G Power, we got a real nice looking hole punch design for the front facing camera. This camera is also 8 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So as far as the overall features go, both phones have pretty good setups here. But of course, with the Cricket Ovation 3, we are getting an ultra-wide camera, whereas unfortunately, despite at least having a macro camera, the Moto G Power doesn't have an ultra-wide camera. So if you do want to get those wider angle photos, then the Cricket Ovation 3 might be a better choice. That being said though, when it comes to photo quality, I would say the Moto G Power has a pretty big advantage. Sure, on one hand, the Cricket Ovation 3 doesn't take terrible photos, but on the other hand, the photo quality with the Moto G Power is still significantly better. Now, to give you an idea of what these phones can do, first, here's some pictures taken with the Cricket Ovation 3. So overall, definitely real nice quality, especially considering at full price, this phone goes for around $120, so it's definitely more on the inexpensive side. But yeah, despite this, it does take some really good photos. So if you're taking pictures for something like social media, for example, while it's not the most amazing quality ever, it will at least get the job done. So if you're more of a casual camera user, and again, maybe you want an ultra-wide camera too, then this phone is going to be a pretty good choice for you. And then here's some pictures taken with the Moto G Power. So while the Cricket Ovation 3 does again take some pretty good photos, the Moto G Power is still quite a bit better, which is probably not surprising considering this phone does have a 50 megapixel camera versus only 13 with the Cricket Ovation 3. So overall, if you're not too concerned about photo quality, but maybe you do want an ultra wide camera, the Cricket Ovation 3 will be a good choice for you. But on the other hand, if you do want the better photo quality between the two, and you're not too concerned about whether or not you have an ultra wide camera, you are going to want to go with the Moto G Power. Now when it comes to RAM and processor, with the Cricket Ovation 3, we're getting 3GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio A25 processor. With the Moto G Power, this phone has 4GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio G37. For overall performance, considering these are really entry-level devices, neither phone is really that slow. I mean, for basic activities like web browsing, some light social media use, and then watching the occasional video every now and then, both phones will get the job done, but I would say between the two, the Moto G Power is a bit faster. That being said though, again, the difference really isn't huge, and for the most part, the activities you're really going to be able to do with these phones are pretty much the same. But if you do want things to be a little bit more snappy and maybe a tiny bit smoother, then yeah, the Moto G Power will have a slight advantage. Now, I did run benchmark tests on these phones using Geekbench 5, and here are the results I got. So again, not really a huge difference, but as you can see, the Moto G Power does have a bit of an advantage. But in general, if you are looking for more of an entry-level basic device for more basic activities, then you're really not going to go wrong with either phone here. For the batteries, with the Cricket Ovation 3, we're getting a 4000 mAh battery, and with the Moto G Power, this phone has a 5000 mAh battery. So between the two, of course, the Moto G Power does have a significant advantage. So if you are looking for a phone that has really good battery life, both throughout the day and down the road in terms of longevity, the Moto G Power is going to be a great choice. But keep in mind, the Cricket Ovation 3, while having a smaller battery than the Moto G Power, is still really not bad. And for the average user, maybe you're around to charge a decent amount, or you're just not really using your phone a ton throughout the day. In that situation, despite again not having the best, most amazing battery life, it will at least get the job done. But of course, if the battery is more of a priority for you, then you are going to want to go with the Moto G Power. As far as the software goes, with the Cricket Ovation 3, this phone does have Android 12, but with the Moto G Power, unfortunately, this phone only has Android 11. Now, granted, neither phone has Android 13, nor do I think either phone is even going to get any major updates. But that being said, if you do want a slightly newer version of Android, then obviously here, the Cricket Ovation 3 will have an advantage. And keep in mind, at this point in 2023, by the time you're watching this, things could be different. But right now, not very many phones in this price range even have Android 13 anyway. So getting a phone with Android 12 at this point is probably not going to be too bad. That being said though, with the Android 11, it's kind of a different story because at this point, seeing that the Moto G Power is 2 softwares behind, it definitely is getting a bit more on the outdated side. But of course, if you don't really care that much about having the latest version of Android, then either phone is going to be at least okay. But if you want something slightly newer, the Cricket Ovation 3 again will have an advantage. Another thing to keep in mind here is that with the Cricket Ovation 3, we are actually getting NFC. Whereas unfortunately, with the Moto G Power, this phone does not have NFC. So if you like to use tap and pay, you will want to go with the Cricket Ovation 3. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? Now, in general, if you're looking for an affordable entry-level device for more basic activities, then honestly, either phone is a pretty solid choice. That being said though, each phone does have some advantages and drawbacks. On one hand, with the Cricket Ovation 3, compared to the Moto G Power, this phone has some slightly nicer and newer features like an ultra-wide camera, NFC so you can use tap and pay, a significantly larger display, and a newer version of Android. But on the other hand, the storage on this phone with only 32GB is honestly pretty bad, and having a 4000 mAh battery, while definitely not being the end of the world, is obviously not going to be nearly as good as a 5000 mAh battery. So if the battery is important to you, then this is definitely something to keep in mind. And then with the Moto G Power, this phone is faster, has much better photo quality, with a 50 megapixel camera. It also has double the storage, and again, a much larger battery. So if you want a larger display, an ultra-wide camera, and you like to use tap and pay, the Cricket Ovation 3 will be a better choice for you. But on the other hand, if you want more storage, a faster processor, a much higher quality main camera, and a significantly larger battery, then in that case, you will be better off with the Moto G Power. But this concludes my comparison between the Cricket Ovation 3 and the Motorola Moto G Power 2022. Again, if you want to learn more about either phone individually, be sure to check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about each phone, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.